Welcome to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good in our communities, and also sharing amazing books. And so with that, we're going to kick it off with an author, an entrepreneur. He is the president of JBM Enterprises. He's the past founder and CEO of Interactive Solutions, Inc., ISI. We're talking about Jay Myers, and his latest book is Rounding Third and Heading for Home, The Emotional Journey of Selling My Business and the Lessons Learned Along the Way. His other books are Keep Swinging and Hitting the Curveballs. But Jay, how are you doing, buddy?
Doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So you do a lot of good here in the community. You are a resident fellow. You're a part of the residents of the University of Memphis and the Fogelman College of Business and Economics. So you do a lot with college students. You do a lot with the Society of Entrepreneurs. So you are inducted into that as well. So you've got a lot on your resume, but let's start with this book. And what led you to write this book?
Well, Jeremy, when I sold my business in 2018, it gave me an opportunity several months later to sort of reflect on how did we get there? You know, what was the journey, and what did we do to be able to present ourselves on the market and have an opportunity to sell? As I stated in the book, I never had the desire to really sell the business. I mean, we had put another plan together that my son was going to take over and do some other things there. And, you know, the best laid plans, right? Sometimes, you know, things happen. But in reflecting on the sale, it made me go back in time to all the different pieces of the puzzle that we had, you know, not necessarily intentionally, we didn't know at the time, but we were putting these pieces in place to build value in ISI for it to become an attractive target for an acquirer.
One of the things that you do very well in the book is you lay out a lot of the context. And so start on that side, because we'll kind of take the book in a few different places, but tell a little bit of your story, because you share the story of like even smartly figuring out, okay, if I carry multiple racks of Coke and I can sell them at the same time while everyone else is having to go refuel theirs, I could be selling, you know, so you kind of walk through some of the lessons you learned early on that you can then use to build your business. But give a little bit of your backstory.
Well, I was born in Louisiana and lived there, moved to Memphis when I was 9 years old. And, you know, big Catholic family. We had, you know, more kids than we had room in the house and those sort of things. But went to school locally, proud graduate of Christian Brothers High School, and of course, the University of Memphis, as you mentioned. You know, through the years, Jeremy, whether it was high school or college, I always worked my way through school. And it's funny, though, even as a kid in grade school, when I was throwing newspapers, I didn't realize at the time, but I was learning many valuable business lessons about like customer service. And I remember that in one case in the book that I mentioned, I'm throwing a free newspaper. I mean, it didn't cost anything, the East Memphis Shoppers News. And I would, you know, good job, was paid. I mean, for what I was doing, I guess it was, you know, one day a week, a pretty good pay. And I appreciated it. And I started, I guess, I don't know, after I've been doing it for a while, getting complaints from customers, like the papers were blowing or something like that. And I'm going, what are you talking about? And I remember having to kind of, even as a kid, sort of control myself and kind of stay after the job, because at the end of the day, as my mother often told me, you know, the customer's always right. And then as, you know, time went on, you know, it just things kind of, the work ethic kicked in. And you were mentioning the story about when I was, I guess, in high school, you know, like any other person in high school trying to get some extra money, you know, put gas in the car, those sort of things. And I had a job selling Cokes at the Liberty Bowl, which doesn't sound glamorous, I understand. And for most part, I mean, it was kind of a grinding job, and you ended up after the evening of selling Cokes and making change and all this stuff covered with sugar, really, stuff that came out of the Coke, and it was kind of sticky and kind of crazy. But one of the nights that I think I may have become the entrepreneur that night was the Liberty Bowl. And I believe it's either 1970 or 71. I'm not sure exactly what year, but Tennessee was playing Arkansas is all I remember. And I just remember that most of the time we were selling Cokes, we'd have one tray at a time. And I started just looking around and said, God, this isn't like a Tiger game. There's people all over the place. And then I noticed that a lot of them were indulging. A lot of them had brought their own liquor and everything. And so I'm going like, wow, I think I can make a whole lot more money if I can just kind of gut it out here. So I stacked 3 of these trays up instead of 1. The guy kind of questioned me about it, and I said, hey, I'm paying you, let's go. And I would literally walk a few hundred feet and just start sniffing around who was drinking the most liquor. And it was like, and they would do it, and I'd be selling these Cokes. Heck, I made $40 in an hour that night. And I was like, this is the greatest job I've ever had. I sat down after halftime and I said, it don't get any better than this for a 15-year-old kid. I'm just telling you. But I think that was like, crazy a story as it sounds, it was also like, as an entrepreneur, finding the opportunity and filling the niche. They wanted Cokes quick, and they were willing to tip and do, so off we went. It was a lot of fun. But, I do think that, as crazy as those stories are that I put in the book, it really served to position that I have always worked hard, had work ethic, but also willing to look at different opportunities to improve my skills at whatever I was doing.
So you get into video conferencing way before. I mean, the irony is now, you and I were joking, before we started the interview, but now video conferencing, what we're doing, like this is everyday normal during the pandemic, but you got into this business way early on, early adopter. So on that side, kind of an innovator, but share the story of getting in and creating ISI. Let's talk about building the business, because you build it up over $25 million, over 55 employees. You build it up, but you learn, though, through the process, especially of getting named as one of the fastest growing companies and all the calls coming in, there's a difference between what you might think the business is worth versus what someone is going to acquire it for. And so you start going to all these different classes to figure out, okay, if I'm really going to build value in this company, what are the things that they're looking at? And so talk about building ISI, and then obviously the lens of looking at value.
Yeah, sure. Just a real quick segment on that. I did work for corporate America for several years and did well in sales and everything, and transitioned to, after I'd worked for Hewlett Packard for a couple of years, I realized technology was a future and went to work for a local, technically a regional telecom company in Memphis that literally I got introduced to the opportunity of a lifetime. And I got introduced to video conferencing in the fall of 1990. Worked for that company for 5 years, early days, Jeremy, where this stuff wasn't working as well as this does today, right? And we had a lot of ups and downs, but we got it up to about $5 million. And I thought I was doing pretty well, but I guess some of the management had other thoughts, and they fired me on my 39th birthday. So let's not get too impressed with my entrepreneurial journey in the sense that, I was sitting in a garage dreaming up video conferencing to grow the market. I try to create a job for myself to feed my family, my 2 kids and a dog. So that was really about it. But I did have a passion for the technology. I didn't think the technology had really reached anywhere near its potential. And let me digress, Jeremy, and tell you, between 1990 and 95, with a $5 million in sales, we sold to basically one market: higher learning, colleges and universities. And my whole premise behind ISI was to build it up, by virtue of going after where other people are not going, which is corporate America. And then, as you and I talked earlier, I had the opportunity a couple of years into ISI to discover, if you will, telehealth. And that completely changed my business. When the fast growth happened, Jeremy, and the Inc. magazine recognition, and that's a very prestigious magazine. We've had a ton of fun at the conventions and stuff. You inevitably get on a list, not only on the magazine, but on lists of, people that are trying to buy and sell businesses, and those sort of things and everything. So I just noticed that first time we made the list, I think we finished number 182 or something, which was pretty cool. And we're real excited about it and everything. And then it just seemed like a few months after that publication came out, those calls started coming in. And hey, any entrepreneur that gets those kind of calls saying something about how great their business is, and are you interested in selling? Anybody says that they're not going to listen, that's not telling the truth. Okay, you have to listen. And I would be flattered, and I go, God, that's great. Let me close my door of my office so nobody else hears this conversation. And it was kind of funny. But I also understood, after getting a number of those calls, Jeremy, I didn't really know what the business was worth. I could have said yes and probably made the biggest mistake of my life or whatever. So I decided to kind of get, educated about the process, Really didn't have any interest in selling then. And even up to the point I ended up doing it in 2018. Again, I didn't really have desire to do that, but I also knew that I was vulnerable because I didn't have the education of knowing what people are looking for. And there's a science behind, these acquisitions and mergers and things. It's not just, some lucky something falls out of the sky, and so through those seminars and things, and this was multiple years, okay? Multiple years, I started learning the different things that they were looking for potential acquirers in different businesses, not necessarily technology alone, but that a lot of the things that I think I put in the book, that came as part of the whole, operating strategy through this thing was, people. One of the most important things I remember about those days was that I had this thing in my head about who we were and what value, we're in this cool technology, which is great. And I had these preconceived notions, but the reality, it's like any kind of sales thing. People buy for their reasons, not yours. You think you're cool and sexy. You know what they care about? That you're profitable. And, some of the other things that I think, if you don't mind me mentioning now, that I learned along the way was you don't sell your business, when you sell a business when it's ready, not when you're ready. I know for me, man, I was handing off the business to my son. He was going to buy some equity, and then all of a sudden this liquidity event occurred. And so the business was ready in our case. But the other thing I really learned, and I think this is really important for your listeners to understand, it's not what you think your business is worth. It's what someone is willing to pay for it. And I have so many friends in my industry at AV and video conferencing that, as you and I were talking earlier, they just great people, hardworking, but they thought, well, gosh, my company sold $10 million last year, so somebody's going to come in and write me a check for $10 million. It doesn't work like that. And so, it was tough. And then, the other thing I learned too, and I learned this really in that process in 2018 was you don't, you sell the future, you don't sell the past. The acquirer is going to look at the past, but you've got to sell the future of what this, and I will tell you, that's one of the things that I didn't realize I would be caught up in it, but I'm a salesman. That's what I am. I mean, my bloodline runs. And it was like, I know during that summer of 2018, Jeremy, I got caught up in the sales process. After a while, it was like, not necessarily them trying to buy me, I'm trying to sell them, and so it was kind of an interesting experience.
So a couple of things I want to bounce back, because in the book, you share a lot of adventures and stories along the way, some good and some not so good, including embezzlement and some of the things that you had to deal with. There are some really heartfelt stories, though, of an employee who faces a sickness and you decide to do the right thing and to stand behind them. So you've got a lot of really just kind of heartwarming stories in there, but you also have some really good tips where one of the mentors basically says to you during a rocky time where you're like, hey, we might want to diversify. And he says, no, stick to what you're good at, follow this course, focus. What's one or two other, or maybe one other major kind of takeaway that you want kind of in that realm of just bits of advice during those ISI days? What's one other takeaway that you want readers to take away?
Well, I think the chapter that you allude to is, the sensitivity to employees and the loyalty that you show them. It pays dividends. The culture you create, the employee loyalty that we had, and you remember, Jeremy, in the book I mentioned, we were almost zero turnover for several years, and that's unheard of in technology, pretty much in any business. But we really felt good about that. We weren't, I'm not the king of whatever. I mean, it was just trying to do the right thing by people and putting myself in their shoes. And when you do that, again, some people think, oh, you're coddling your employees or doing something else. No. You actually, in our case, didn't realize at the time, we're just trying to do the right thing, but that's value. An acquirer comes in, they don't want to see people 35, 40% turnover. If you got less than 10 or 5 or 0 for us for a while, that's attractive. So I would like that for readers to read that chapter about the employee loyalty and the company culture, because it's important. The other one too, and this is more of kind of a life and business lesson, Jeremy, but you don't burn bridges, whether in life or business. You and I both know that. And, from a business side, it was practical in the sense that somebody decides not to do business with you anymore for whatever reasons. They may not be good reasons in your opinion, but it's their reasons. You don't just cast them aside and say, and shove them away. You maintain a professional relationship. And Jeremy, as I mentioned in the book, time and time again, we had people come back, and one guy even apologized for not doing the big contract with us. And I said, we're good. Let's go forward now. And they became one of my most profitable accounts. We'll leave the name out of it to protect the innocent there. But, I think in life as well, it doesn't pay to burn bridges. Life is too short anyway. You want to experience everything you can and keep it positive at all times.
Yeah, I think there's tons of those lessons all throughout the book, which readers can take away as they go through this journey. When we get to the M&A process, there is a specific part of there where you say, hey, my CPA firm, thank you so much for this kind of news that comes to light in terms of like something that even I had never heard of, but really cool. So talk about that moment where you kind of find out there's an opportunity where you can have some savings on your end based on what the CPA comes back and recommends.
Yeah, Jeremy, they called it personal goodwill, and I had never heard of it before. And the process was, with personal goodwill, you have to go not to the accountant that does your normal books, but somebody that specializes in personal goodwill and that type of audit. And I spent a full day of just endless number of questions about my contribution personally to the business, what accounts I'd brought in, the profitability, so on and so forth. And at the time I was like, God, I just wasted a day and a lot of money with this guy or what? And then when I come back, and at the time of the transaction, they plug in the personal goodwill. When they come up with a number to pay you for your business, we ask them to, for the lack of a better word, divert professionally the personal goodwill of this amount of the money, that the total they were paying me. And Jeremy, it was amazing. I mean, I'm looking at the tax savings. I'm going like, I about fainted. It was crazy. So personal goodwill, for all your listeners out there that have the interest in that kind of thing, personal goodwill is something you need to explore with your accountant if you consider, selling your business some point in the future. Yeah, I think that's a really a good part of the book that I think that, Jeremy, you're bringing up is you got to understand, if you ever get into a situation with an acquisition, this is not child's play. This ain't amateur hour. You got to go in with guns blazing, not in a bad way, but you got to be serious. And what I mean by serious is, you got to have a really good accountant, and I have a terrific one. And you got to have a really good lawyer, a terrific one I had as well. Both of them had M&A experience. This is not something you want to just try out and see if it works out for you. It just, it doesn't. And so, it's the most important deal potentially that you'll ever have in your life and your business career. You got to treat it seriously. You do that, bring in the type of team that you really have to get it done successfully. We spent a lot of money on the acquisition in terms of the accounting support and the legal, but gosh, Jeremy, it paid dividends. I'll just tell you, it was a successful transaction.
Wrap it up on your end, because you do talk about the business side, but also the emotional side, the personal side. And during the process of this, you're also, by the way, going through the process of marrying your daughter, like having her marriage and trying to plan the wedding and all these things. And so it's a destination wedding. So it's like you have to go and, physically be there. And even during the wedding ceremony part, that you have other things you're having to navigate through. And so talk about on your end, kind of the personal side of letting the business go, and what your advice is for other business owners to kind of set themselves up for that personal side just as much as the business side, like we talked about.
Sure. I mean, selling a business, particularly one that you created, not just one you inherited or whatever else, it's a very emotional experience. And in my case, I mean, the planning, gosh, could it have been worse in many ways? I mean, literally walked my daughter down the aisle on October 27th, and then 4 days later, sell my business. So letting 2 babies go in less than a week, it was just, I had people that thought I was going to blow up. I mean, I think you saw the story, read the stories in the book about one of my guys, after we disclosed the whole thing and an announcement and all, he turns around, he said, dude, I swear I thought you'd be in the hospital with those announcements. And, maybe I should have been. I don't know. It went crazy. But honestly, Jeremy, I was at peace with both decisions or events and everything. But for your listeners out there, just understand, if nothing else I've said today makes any sense, understand selling a business is a deeply emotional experience. It's way, way more than a financial transaction. It's literally it's a change of life transaction, and you have to be ready for it. And I think you noticed in the book and everything about exit strategies and things I've been trying to do it. I'm still working on it. I'll be honest with you. It's not it's a working process. I'm used to being busy and having people at my door, nonstop, 5 days a week. And so it's different now, but, wrote the book to help people through this process. And even if they just think about it, whether they ever do it or not, that's really was the motivation. I enjoy writing anyway, and it was a lot of fun putting it together.
We'll talk about where we can get the book and website. How do we follow you in your journey? So where do we get the book and how do we follow you?
Okay, so you get the book at, let's go with the independent bookstores and plug local Memphis store there, Novel. And then the usual place like Amazon, Barnes & Noble. We're going to have it at Burke's, by the way, as well. And then, in terms of following me, jmyersceo.com. And, we've been posting a lot of things on social media. So I'm on Twitter at JB Myers and LinkedIn. And I think for your listeners out there, check out the latest. We put some teasers out there about the book and pretty cool videos that we shot on the Memphis Tiger baseball field. It was kind of fun. But I really did enjoy putting the book together. It was hard. It was a year's journey to write it. And but I think there's some real value for people out there.
Well, definitely appreciate you writing the book. And like I said, it's a great read. So highly encourage everyone to check it out and get it. But Jay, thank you for all you do and for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you for having me on the show.